Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name is Pat. I'm from Farmington. I'm a public school parent of 2 children and a spouse of a public school kindergarten teacher. And I'm here today with some good news for the schools of Minnesota. The bill that we passed successfully out of committee just moments ago on a bipartisan 14-5 vote reduces the debt that we owe to our schools, preserves our cash balance accounts at twice the level they were 2 years ago, and reduces liabilities into the future. This is good news for the schools of Minnesota. It's good news for the state, and it points that Minnesota is on the right track. So that's it, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
The governor seems to think that this is kind of a cover your butt bill for last session, and that it puts the state in a more precarious shape than with a lower reserve.
Did he say his butt or my butt?
Your butt.
Okay. Well, as everyone knows, Governor Dayton proposed to increase the education shift to 50%. As part of a compromise effort, Republicans accepted the increase to 40%. But the good news is that instead of Minnesotans arguing about who's responsible for increasing the shift, this bill gives us an opportunity to talk about who gets credit for not only paying back the obligations, the increase in the shift from last session, but also paying down the shift from the previous legislature.
What's your assessment of the risk that it would cause the state to go into the next year, way into June of 13, with no budget reserve and no cash flow account?
Well, if you look at the previous budget that was agreed to, the cash balances for the state of Minnesota we're proposing to have them be double what they were in 2010. No, it was actually it was 275 was the amount, and so we're proposing a more than doubling of the cash balances the state of Minnesota has on hand. And keep in mind, when that budget was adopted, the economy actually deteriorated. So we believe the economy is turning around, but even if it doesn't, with a doubling of cash reserves, that puts Minnesota into a stronger position than we were 2 years ago. In addition, it's generally accepted accounting principles that the prudent course of action is, when you have cash on hand, is to pay off your debt. And on the state's accounting sheets, these obligations to schools are listed as debt, and so we think it's a good idea to pay those down as opposed to having cash in the bank.
So there'd be $550 million in reserves?
The cash on hand would be approximately $577 million.
And that's cash and reserves?
That's the cash flow and the budget reserve are one and the same for cash accounting, so that would be those two combined. Right now, we currently have in excess of $1.2 billion. Automatically, $318 million of that is going to go to paying back the schools. Of the remaining balance, about $1 billion, we're proposing that roughly 40% of that be used to repay the debt to schools.
If a family were in the same situation, say they made $30,000 a year, and they had some debt, and they came into a situation where they had $1,000, that they could sort of put in for a rainy day fund, would you recommend, would you advise them to use that $1,000 or a good portion of it to pay down their debt? Or do you think it would be wise for them to hold on to that $1,000 in case their car blows up or something like that?
Well, generally accepted accounting principles are that it's preferable to pay down debt than to have cash on hand. Now, in this case, the shift is not an ongoing cost. Just like when it's increased, it generates one-time savings. Paying back the shift is a one-time cost. So this is not an ongoing expenditure. It's a one-time cost to our budget, and it's a prudent use of the budget reserves.
In 2004, the legislature passed the statute that establishes this payback protocol, where you refill the cash flow account and then the reserves and then pay back school shifts. The Republicans were in charge of the legislature then, were they, or at least the House? Were they wrong?
Well, I think that it's a higher priority to pay back the debt than to have this cash on hand. And I believe that we have bipartisan support for that agreement, as was evidenced by the committee vote today, where we had a 14-5 vote, a bipartisan vote. And I think this is this is really good news for the state, and I look forward to the ongoing debate and additional support for it.
Go, Pat.
What about, I know some folks are calling this a political ploy by tacking in the last and first out to the bill as well. What's your response to that?
Well, if you take a look at the proposal that Representative Peterson has passed off the House floor and the Senate in a bipartisan nature, on a nationwide basis, Democrat governors are leading the effort. Governor Cuomo in New York, the governor of Colorado has signed this. Most recently, the Democrat governor of Connecticut has supported this. Such right-wing publications as the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, the Pioneer Press, and the Duluth News-Tribune, the Albert Lee News-Tribune, the Fairmont Sentinel have all come out in favor of this. This is good policy. This is good for kids. Everybody agrees that the current system is broken. What we want to do is we want to pass bills that not only help our schools out financially, but more importantly, allow for the most effective and highly qualified teacher to be in the classroom. In addition, there's some other good provisions in this bill as well. There's some mandate relief. There's some antiquated statutes in the law right now that say we force school districts to spend money when they don't want to on their community service funds. If they don't spend that money, we actually penalize them and cut them. This was a request that came from Representative McElpatrick in going out and listening to her constituents. In addition, we have some transparency language. Recently, the Burnsville severance package issue where taxpayers are not having sunlight being shined on a process which resulted in over $250,000 of dollars intended for education services going out. So that's a bill that, again, has gained bipartisan support. So overall, we think that having good policy that improves education in Minnesota is the right thing to do.
Have you heard anything on the Senate end of what they're going to do? Are they going to be doing this as well, or is there going to be another omnibus bill in the House as well? I know there's some discussion about that in committee.
Success is a journey, not a destination, and so we are not done in the education world with our work. We still have much more to do.
So say again how much money would be left within the two reserve portions, the traditional reserve and the cash flow?
About $577 million. So what we're proposing to do is, right now we've got over $1 billion cash on hand. We're proposing that roughly 40% of that go towards paying our debt to the schools. And it's important to note that that cash balance is more than double what was proposed 2 years ago with the previous budget and the previous legislature. That number was $275.
You guys expressed some concern when the bond houses downgraded the state right away. The bond houses look at how much reserve you have in relation to your budget size. Do you think that this will hurt the ability of the state to get back to a AAA?
What previous testimony has been from previous commissioners of finance is that reducing liabilities is a preferable use to having the funds sit cash on hand.
I'll just add my 2 cents to it. One of the things that, when folks go through tough times at home, they start to look at if they've had to borrow some money for roof repair, car goes down, they lose a transmission that costs $5,200. Not that I would know by specifics, but maybe you have to make some of those short-term loans to pay that back first, or if you use ready reserve, which and a lot of times that's what the budget reserve is seen as. But we heard loud and clear from Minnesotans, not from our colleagues in the minority or from those that chatter about here at the Capitol, but from Minnesotans, that would be one of the first things that we should do. Not only do we hear that, we believe in it. That's why we're bringing forth this proposal, but yet leaving well over $500 million in that cash flow, which is very critically important so that we don't have to short-term borrow. But then there also will be some in the reserve. We believe we're on a good track now, that this fall there will be more reserves, and that we will actually continue then to pay down that shift as quickly as possible. And we actually have it in law. This is an acceleration. We did not see that from previous legislatures.
Commissioner Showalter said that this could increase the need to do short-term borrowing to manage cash flow in coming years. My question is, if we're here a year from now and we have to do short-term borrowing, will you still think this was a worthwhile decision to make?
Well, it's predicated on 3 ifs. If we get short on cash, which at $351 million is what's in statute, that is going to be in the fund still. There'll still be additional 200 and some million available. So I don't believe we've gotten to over $500 million in cash flow need before. So that's the first if. The second if is that in November, the forecast goes down again. We don't believe that that's going to happen. It may not go $1 billion to the north, but I don't believe it will go down. The third if is if we get to next spring, and then we need to borrow cash flow, but they will be back in session then, and we will be able to adjust for that at that time. We could pass a supplemental then.
You only have then a few months of the biennium left, and as Governor Plenty had to do in '03, you might put Governor Dayton in a position of unallotment. Some folks think that's the point here, is it?
Well, no, not at all. Again, it's predicated on three ifs. I don't believe we get to past the first if. And if I'm proven wrong with historical data that at some point we've needed $600 or $700 million worth of cash, I'll be happy to be corrected. But I don't believe we've ever gotten to that point. So that's the first if that is predicated on a lot of this. And, quite honestly, there's a lot of folks, including Commissioner Showalter and some of the administration, that were pretty vocal about chastising us for this shift, even though they themselves, actually proposed a 50-50 shift, which isn't a click, that's a spin of the wheel. We believe that this is the prudent fiscal thing to do now and to continue to do it in the future, again, to pay down that liability. As Chair Garofalo said, that's one of the things that the bond houses look at as well. So it's a lot of what-if scenarios, and we have two forecasts in that time to address should we need to. I don't believe we will.
What is the equivalent of on a per pupil basis that schools will get faster under this proposal than if they would have to wait for the traditional, or the normal payback?
It's approximately about $780 per pupil. That's the total amount of the 318. If you want to general rule, it's about 800,000 students, but because of student weighting, basically about $1 million. There's 1 million students, so figure go from there. So $700 million, $700 per pupil.
Is what they'll get. They were going to get the money anyway. It's just they'll get it sooner.
Right. So just to make clear, is that the make-up payments, they're going to take place in July, August, September, and October. We're accelerating those so schools are getting their money earlier.
So what you're saying is that if they didn't do this, they would get back about 300 and change. But if you add this on, it would get to that 780.
Right. The numbers are 318 and 430.
And the 318 is what's in statute right now.
Right. Based on the last forecast, the one we got a couple weeks ago.
Correct.
This involves repealing the 2004 statute that says you pay back the cash flow first and then the reserves and then the schools?
No.
You don't have to repeal that, so that will still be the protocol for the future.
Are you guys leaving yourself any room for other stuff? I know that Chairman Davids is anxious to get some money for his property tax stuff. Or are you pretty much putting everything into buying back the shift, all the latitude that you guys have?
Stay tuned. We may have some things, but for right now, we're focusing on the education shift.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.